Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. A couple of days ago, I said the Supreme Court is going to get involved. Now, today, former and future President Trump has officially asked the Supreme Court, hit subscribe. The Supreme Court, just like I said it would with the Colorado decision, overturning the absurd, unconstitutional Colorado ban, and you will hear from President Trump in a couple of seconds. You will hear from legal scholars in a couple of seconds. But just like I said, there would be a unanimous decision to overturn and reverse an unconstitutional Colorado ban. Even liberal justices overturned the state decision in Colorado. You are going to get not only an immunity decision that is going to favor Trump, that I've predicted, and that's on the horizon, but you're going to get the Supreme Court to overturn an unconstitutional guilty verdict because there was no federal crime. I repeat, the FEC, in charge of campaign finance laws, did not find a law that Trump broke. That's why we still don't know the legal statute, the FEC statute that Trump was convicted on. We don't know what federal law he broke because he didn't break a federal law. The Department of Justice did not level any criminal federal crime against Trump. The FEC did not even fine Trump. The FEC fined Clinton and the DNC. Okay, let's listen to, so they purchased the Steele dossier, which was a campaign, they broke campaign finance laws purchasing the Steele dossier because it was an expenditure only meant to ruin Trump's chances in 2016 and beyond. The reason that paying Stormy, even if he paid with his own checkbook, his own money, let's say he paid Stormy, it would not be an FEC violation because it would have taken place with or without a campaign. That's what Bradley Smith says right here. And hit subscribe to this channel. You'll hear from Justice Roberts in a second as well. But this is Bradley Smith explaining that Trump did not commit a crime. And this was years back. Hit subscribe to my super chat. Thank you to the members of this channel. Thank you. This is the man, ladies and gentlemen, that the court would not let defend Trump. You're going to hear why Democrats did not want this man to speak.
Well, we know why they're not indicted, right? Because we don't want to indict them. But no, it's a good example of things that influence the campaign. And it's worth noting that under the FEC's regulations, if you're an incumbent office holder, you're presumed to be running for re-election. So you're all presumed to be candidates unless they've announced that they're not seeking re-election. So they would be candidates, and this is something that they probably did to influence their future campaign or their perception as office holders. And one thing that's worth adding here, Mark, is because I hear this from people all the time, and even some other, election people who know election law, lawyers, and some former other commissioners will say, yes, but it was to influence an election. But the FEC in its regulations very specifically rejected the idea that even as to whether it was primarily to influence the election or not, and choosing instead this test that it has to be an obligation that was created for the election. In other words, they didn't want to get into the question of trying to guess, well, did they do this primarily for the election or primarily for personal purposes? And it's very specific about that in the regulations. And I think that's a very important point that people need to keep in mind. And that was done actually to make it more objective and actually to prevent candidates from using their campaign funds for personal use. But, that's the flip side. And I tell people, imagine if you're a lawyer for the Trump campaign and you want to do it all right. You've got one provision of the statute says I have to pay it with the campaign funds. Another provision seems to say I can't pay it with campaign funds. Somebody's going to get them coming or going, and that's part of the problem.
So if you're a lawyer...
So according to Bradley Smith, again, it's not a federal crime. That's why the FEC did not fine Trump. Okay, and that's why what he just said right now, they didn't want him to tell the court this. They didn't want the court to know that Trump didn't commit an FEC fine. A federal law governing campaign finance issues is supposed to be decided upon by the FEC or the Department of Justice, not a court in New York. And so that's what makes this a constitutional issue, and you could get a unanimous Supreme Court decision on this. Listen to this again. If Trump paid Stormy with dollar bills, it still wouldn't be a crime.
We don't want to indict them. But no, it's a good example of things that influence the campaign. And it's worth noting that under the FEC's regulations, if you're an incumbent office holder, you're presumed to be running for re-election. So you're all presumed to be candidates unless they've announced that they're not seeking re-election. So they would be candidates, and this is something that they probably did to influence their future campaign or their perception as office holders. And one thing that's worth adding here, Mark, is because I hear this from people all the time, and even some other, election people who know election law, lawyers and some former other commissioners will say, yes, but it was to influence an election. But the FEC in its regulations very specifically rejected the idea that even as to whether it was primarily to influence the election or not, and choosing instead this test that it has to be an obligation that was created for the election.
The Steele dossier was created for 2016. It was a compilation of pure lies, deceit, and information that misinforms. That is what Democrats love. Okay, that's why they kept trying to prove the dossier was accurate, even though we all knew immediately when it was published by BuzzFeed, they even said it was baseless accounts. Then they got sued for libel, and then they got out of the defamation suit or the libel suit by saying, well, the government, this was a government document or the government purchased it or used it, to investigate Trump. But they barely got out of that lawsuit, and now they're not doing work in political journalism anymore, from what I understand. But the point is, the Steele dossier was purchased by the Clinton campaign and the DNC for the purpose of influencing 2016. If Trump paid Stormy with, his own checkbook, it would not be a campaign finance issue, because it could also be, even if it helped his campaign, because the way the FEC laws are written, which is what Bradley Smith would have told the jury and the court, you can benefit from a personal expenditure as long as it's something that would have been a personal expenditure with or without a campaign. So we know that celebrities do this all the time. They're not running for president. So that's why the payment to Stormy was not an FEC crime. The FEC looked at the case. The Federal Election Commission looked at the case, dropped the case, decided to fine Clinton and the DNC for purchasing the Steele dossier. It's Democrats, literally Democrats broke campaign finance laws, were fined because of it, and it's Trump that gets convicted.
In other words, they didn't want to get into the question of trying to guess, well, did they do this primarily for the election or primarily for personal purposes? And it's very specific about that in the regulations. And I think that's a very important point that people need to keep in mind. And that was done actually to make it more objective and actually to prevent candidates from using their campaign funds for personal use. But, that's the flip side. And I tell people, imagine if you're a lawyer for the Trump campaign and you want to do it all right. You've got one provision of the statute says I have to pay it with campaign funds. Another provision seems to say I can't pay it with campaign funds. Somebody's going to get them coming or going, and that's part of the problem.
So if you're a lawyer for the Trump campaign or the coming Trump campaign, you would do pretty much what Donald Trump did. No campaign money, consult your private lawyer, and they enter into these non-disclosure agreements. Greg, let me ask you this. Isn't the real issue here is people were actually paid under the non-disclosure agreements and then they violated the non-disclosure agreements?
That is called extortion. When you accept money and for a non-disclosure agreement and then say, I want more money after I've already accepted money, or I will tell what I promised not to tell.
I don't see them giving the money back.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I think it's malpractice for the attorney for Stormy Daniels to say, go ahead and talk while the case is pending as to whether or not it's a valid and enforceable non-disclosure agreement. So it's stunning to me. But to Bradley's point, not everything that benefits a candidate is considered to be a campaign expense. Professor Smith wrote that in one of his op-eds, and he's absolutely right. If there is a dual purpose or a secondary purpose, it's not a campaign expense. And moreover, the media rushed and said, oh, Cohen pled guilty, the president must be guilty. That's utter nonsense. First of all, under the Federal Campaign Election Act and other related laws that criminalize violations, there has to be knowledge. You have to show that there was a knowing and deliberate violation of the law in order for it to be criminal. Well, most candidates don't know the election law.
They said that he intended to break the law, Trump. The intent was there. The law literally states if it's a personal expenditure that would have taken place at any point in time, with or without a campaign, it's not a campaign finance issue. So it really doesn't matter whether he wanted to pay Stormy to help his campaign. It's not relevant because the expenditure is different from the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier was only purchased for 2016. Celebrities pay quote-unquote hush money all the time, and it's perfectly legal.
Heck, a lot of lawyers don't understand election laws. This gentleman, former commissioner, the Federal Election Commission, chairman, I mean, he knows election law. He may be just about the only one in America who really truly knows it.
Bradley Smith knows election law. That's why they didn't allow him to testify on Trump's behalf, because he would have exonerated and defended Trump and stated categorically, just like the FEC did when they dropped the case, that Trump did not, I repeat, did not break any campaign finance laws.
So you couldn't criminalize what Trump did if it wasn't properly accounted for as an advance or reimbursement. Okay, that's a civil penalty. It's the equivalent of a jaywalking $500 fine, but it's certainly not a crime.
I did a search. It didn't take me long. Of all the federal candidates who've been charged and been convicted of violating these laws, I can't find a single one. Are you aware of a single one?
For this kind of scenario?
This kind of scenario?
No, I'm really not. Of course, the most high-profile one would be John Edwards from a few years ago.
And what happened in
Folks may remember that supporters were paying money to a woman, Riley Hunter, I believe was her name, with whom he'd had an affair and an illegitimate child. And now it's worth noting, the U.S. attorney indicted him, so they went to trial on it. So the U.S. attorney thought there was a case, but in the end, the jury did not convict. He was acquitted on some charges, and others was a hung jury. And I think that shows the tremendous difficulty. And one quick little anecdote when we talk about how obscure this law is, how difficult, is Antonin Scalia, who was a reasonably good lawyer, right, actually said from the bench in the Supreme Court argument once that this campaign finance law is so complex, I can't figure it out. So if we've got a Supreme Court justice can't figure it out, you see the problems that people have when they're trying to deal with it on a daily basis.
The reason John Roberts and everyone else that I talk about will overturn this is that John Roberts was, as Chief Justice, was integral in getting liberal justices to overturn the Colorado ban, okay? There is a reason that liberal justices overturned the Colorado ban, because it was blatantly unconstitutional, okay? You can't accuse Trump of committing a rebellion when he hasn't been convicted of a rebellion. You can't say, well, we feel that he committed a rebellion. And so because we feel and we see 1,000 replays on MSNBC and CNN Whereas, that entire summer it was called fiery but mostly peaceful, with billions in property damage, according to CNN, but it was, mostly peaceful. There, it was, a crime against the Constitution, and Trump, was trying to overthrow the government. Well, this is all absurd nonsense and really maniacal leaps of logic. And a state can't decide unilaterally that Trump committed a rebellion. That's why the Colorado Supreme Court, the ruling was overturned even by the liberal justices. I think that even liberal justices, maybe 2 or 3 of them, maybe all 3, maybe one or at least one of the 3 will side with Roberts. I think that Justice Roberts is going to try to get the Supreme Court get a unanimous decision overturning the state trial verdict, because what New York tried to do was desperately combine misdemeanors that went beyond the statute of limitations and an imaginary federal crime and link them together to imprison Trump. And they want to jail Trump. And I've been telling you this today because I had an epiphany. They don't care about the law or the Constitution. They want a certain number of Americans, even people who like Trump, to be fatigued of the apoplectic, manic reaction to Trump. They want Trump derangement fatigue. They want people to say, well, you know what? I like Trump, but I can't stand the hysteria from Democrats, so I won't vote for him. And when they get that picture of Trump in jail, it will tarnish the image, our country's image. It is a travesty of justice. It's the antithesis of the rule of law. All of these things, but it's a warped and twisted political victory for Democrats, because they might very well get enough people to be fatigued of their hysterical reaction, their apoplectic reaction to Trump. That's the reason they want Trump in jail. They want everyone on the planet to see Trump in jail, and they want a certain number of Americans to say, I like Trump, I'd vote for him. But there are too many people that are so intense in their dislike of Trump that I would just rather stay away from it. And that's their very warped and twisted and sinister political viewpoint. That's why the Supreme Court has to get involved, because if they don't get involved before July 12th or July 11th, the RNC convention is what, the 14th? They might actually jail him, which would then, okay, again, if they jail Trump, he will break fundraising records. His popularity will skyrocket, but there will be a certain number of Americans that Democrats are banking on who say, I can't do this anymore. I like Trump, but Democrats are so vicious, I just want them to be normal again. It's a very twisted psychological political stunt that they're doing, and it's the only thing they could do because Biden is that horrible. But let's listen to a brilliant man who is talking about the Supreme Court, Mark Levin.
I'm at the appellate and Supreme Court level. That's where my focus has been my entire career. So what they need to do now, in my view, is to go up the appellate chain in New York. We need to stop whining about how long that's going to take. Seek any emergency, immediate appeal that you possibly can. That's one lane. And the other lane is to try like hell to get to the Supreme Court. People say, well, they're not going to take it. You know what?
I agree 100% with Mark Levin. They will take it. They will definitely take it, because I think Alito and Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Kavanaugh, they know what's going on. They know the wrath and the fury of Democrats. They know exactly what Democrats are up to. They'll take it. And so will Roberts, who Roberts will unite the court to prevent this from, I think, from happening again.
If George Patton was said, I don't think I can get to the Battle of the Bulge in time, we would have lost World War II. I am sick and tired of these legal defeatists. We need to stop whining, stop complaining. We know what the hell we're up against. It's not news. It's a fact. We got to fight these people with our smarts. We have to take some risks. We need to push the edge of the envelope. I don't mean in a way that kooks do it. We need to look at Bush versus Gore. Why did the Supreme Court take that case from the Florida Supreme Court? We need to look at things like common law writs, which I know the audience don't understand, but a lot of lawyers do. Not writs of certiorari based on statute, but common law writs based on judicial decisions. We need to give the Supreme Court the opportunity to fix this. Why? We cannot have local acting judges, Soros DAs, 15,000 district attorney's office, God knows how many state judges, destroying our federal election system, influencing how we elect the president of the United States. And if we have a pathway to bring it to the Supreme Court, even though it's rarely used, and by God, we use it, we use every legal quiver that we possibly can muster.
I agree 100% with Mark Levin, and here's the issue. The Supreme Court is just waiting to take it. I think that they're waiting because it's not good for the country. Look, Clinton had servers with top secret intel on them. There were no misdemeanors that ran beyond statutes for a campaign issue that wasn't even a campaign issue. Biden and Hunter had a laptop full of bribery and graft. These are actual crimes. Trump didn't commit a crime. Paying Stormy is not owning a laptop full of emails linked to bribery or illegally transferring top secret intelligence on servers. It's paying a non-disclosure agreement, and it's not even a campaign finance law issue. The FEC chairman already stated that. The state of New York stated that a federal law was broken, but the federal government did not say that the law was. In fact, the federal government says no laws were broken. So that makes it a constitutional issue, very clear cut. The Supreme Court could be unanimous on this.
Rather than sitting around and saying, well, it'll take 3 months. Fine, follow that. Preserve the state appellate system. And as for this idea that I have a faith in the system, what is a judge? He's flesh and blood. He's a person. He's a lawyer who happens to have a role.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is John Roberts. And this is exactly what will take place before this is the immunity issue. Okay, they're going to give Trump a huge immunity. So Justice Roberts is already talking about giving Trump a huge immunity victory if you listen to this right here. Imagine you had a Supreme Court victory for Trump, a unanimous overturning the Colorado ban. The Supreme Court will go to bat for Trump because he does have immunity. The special counsel is just trying to imprison him like the Democrats in New York, okay? The Supreme Court is not having it. He'll get partial immunity, which will be an enormous victory, okay? They want to jail him. They desperately want to see him in jail so they could put the pictures all over the world. They want the entire world to see Trump in jail. Because whereas they actually committed crimes and get away with them, they accuse Trump of things that they do, or like they just make things up, like Trump is a Kremlin operative. And so they live in a world where they've already convinced themselves that Trump is the greatest, dilemma to humanity. They just have to get these visuals to just, cement their absurd fantasies. So they can say, look, it's reality. All of our delusions are actually reality. And again, it's not about a political victory. It's the antithesis of the rule of law. They actually commit crimes, whereas they try desperately to, piece together nonsense to get Trump convicted of a felony. but it's about a small part, a certain percentage of people who just say, I've had enough. I like Trump, but I've had enough of the absolutely apoplectic reaction from Democrats. Maybe if there was another Republican, Democrats wouldn't act this way, so I'll just wait. And they see, again, Democrats would do this to Nikki Haley, to DeSantis. That's their new way of politics. That's how they can compete with having a terrible economy and a horrible foreign policy. Now they use loyalists at the state level to just go after their political opponents. And it's not just Trump. They would do this now to anyone. But this is Justice Roberts. Listen to this.
So the Court of Appeals below, whose decision we're reviewing, said, quote, a former president can be prosecuted for his official acts because the fact of the prosecution means that the former president has allegedly acted in defiance of the laws. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, I think it sounds tautologically true, but I want to underscore that the obligation of a president is to take care that the laws are faithfully executed.
Well, I think it sounds tautologically true as well, and that, I think, is the clearest statement of the court's holding, which is why it concerns me. As I read it, it says simply, a former president can be prosecuted because he's being prosecuted.
Well, I would not suggest that that's either the proper approach in this case or certainly not the government's approach. A prosecution does, of course, invoke federal criminal law. The allegations have to be presented to a grand jury, which votes upon the indictment.
Well, that's what I mean, shortly after that statement in the court, that court's opinion, that's what they said. But there's no reason to worry because the prosecutor will act in good faith, and there's no reason to worry because a grand jury will have returned the indictment. Now, you know how easy it is in many cases for a prosecutor to get a grand jury to bring an indictment, and reliance on the good faith of the prosecutor may not be enough in some cases.
So Roberts is already alluding to politically motivated prosecutions. The Supreme Court already knows that the states are leveling the law against Trump just to stop him in an unconstitutional manner. Listen to Roberts right here.
I'm not suggesting here. So if it's tautological, and those are the only protections that the Court of Appeals below gave, and that is no longer your position, you're not defending that position, why shouldn't we either send it back to the Court of Appeals or issue an opinion making clear that that's not the law?
Well, I am defending the Court of Appeals judgment, and I do think that there are layered safeguards that the court can take into account that will ameliorate concerns about unduly chilling presidential conduct. That concerns us. We are not endorsing a regime that we think would expose former presidents to criminal prosecution in bad faith, for political animus, without adequate evidence.
And this is, of course, before Trump was convicted of misdemeanors deliberately elevated to felonies in the most absurd manner, purely politically motivated, where everyone is saying it will be overturned on appeal, but that would take a year. At the New York Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court has to get involved before sentencing. They want to sentence Trump to jail.
A politically driven prosecution would violate the Constitution under Waite versus United States. It's not something within the arsenal of prosecutors to do. Prosecutors take an oath. The Attorney General takes an oath. So I don't want to overstate Your Honor's concern with potentially relying solely on good faith. But that's an ingredient, and then the courts stand ready to adjudicate motions based on selective prosecution, political animus. This court relied on those very protections in the Vance case just 2 years ago.
But what concerns me is, as you know, the Court of Appeals did not get into a focused consideration of what acts we're talking about or what documents we're talking about because of its adoption of what you termed, and I agree quite correctly, as a tautological statement because the fact of prosecution was enough to take away any official immunity, the fact of prosecution. They had no need to look at what courts normally look at.
Roberts does not trust the special counsel. That's what he's saying here. He will not trust the verdict in New York either. He's saying that, well, the special counsel indicted Trump, so therefore, because the way the Biden's administration, the way Democrats work is, well, we've indicted Trump, so therefore he's guilty, and he's no longer protected by presidential immunity. How do we know this? Well, because he's been indicted by us. Yeah, you could say the same thing with Hunter's laptop or Clinton's servers. You could indict them and say, yeah, you owned these things, obviously, to circumvent laws or to break laws. Okay? See, Democrats can get servers with top secret intel, laptops full of bribery and graft, and get away with it. Trump, if he pays Stormy, he doesn't even pay Stormy. Michael Cohen paid Stormy, and then he gets convicted.
When you're talking about a privilege or immunity question.
Well, I think I would take issue, Mr. Chief Justice, with the idea of taking away immunity. There is no immunity that is in the Constitution unless this court creates it today. There certainly is no textual immunity.
So when Democrats or liberals read the Second Amendment, they then say, oh, well, even though it's stated shall not be infringed, well, we have to look into that. When they want to get Trump, they say, well, we're textualists now. The text doesn't say that he's immune from this, that he can't be imprisoned, so why not? So it's like the liberal viewpoint of the Constitution is that it evolves and you don't have to read it in the manner it was written. But with Trump, oh my goodness, it doesn't say that he's protected, so therefore we can't protect him. It's like, well, there's also Nixon v. Fitzgerald, Navy versus Egan, all of these Supreme Court cases that give Trump the power to declassify as president, that where he's immune from civil liability, and the Nixon v. Fitzgerald should translate to criminal liability too, especially for a speech. He's protected under his speech literally told people not to go peacefully and patriotically. The problem is that certain people didn't listen to him.
We do not submit that that's the end of the story. United States versus Nixon wasn't a textually based case. Neither was Nixon versus Fitzgerald. We endorse both of those holdings. But what is important is that no public official has ever had the kind of absolute criminal immunity that my friend speaks of, even with respect to the speech or debate clause. It's very narrow. It's focused on legislative acts. It's not focused on everything that a congressman does. And it responds to a very specific historical circumstance that basically involved the two other branches potentially harassing legislators and preventing them from doing their jobs. That's why it ended up in the Constitution. Nothing like that ended up in the Constitution for the presidents, and that's because one of the chief concerns of the framers was the risk of president.
We know the special counsel will lose this argument because every time, like, the Colorado lawyers talked about what the framers wanted, the Supreme Court justices almost, it's almost as if they fell asleep. Because Supreme Court justices don't want to be lectured about the history of the country. They already know the history. Once these lawyers are trying desperately to ban Trump or convict Trump, once they start talking about the mindset of the framers, the justices are like, oh, you don't have an argument. Oh, okay, got it. So anyway, let's listen to President Trump right now. Look, there's nothing stopping Trump. He's going to become president. If they actually jail him, I don't think that'll stop him, but there's a chance it could, because like I said, Democrats are waiting for a percentage of voters, of Americans, to say, I've had enough of the insanity from the Democratic Party. See, it's a temper tantrum by our fellow Americans. It would be the equivalent of going on a road trip and having, a family member just start yelling during the road trip, and exhibiting the greatest temper tantrum you've ever seen, you might just say, you know what, maybe we won't go to this destination anymore, even though you want to. So that's like Democrats have been exhibiting a biblical temper tantrum of epic proportions since Trump defeated Clinton, even before then, or since Trump defeated Clinton, and the rest of the country has had to deal with it. The culmination will be if they could get Trump in jail, because all of their maniacal fantasies will be then validated. Okay, they actually committed crimes. They get away with it. Trump really did not at all. There was no crime. But they want to see him in jail, which would be amusing because you'd have Secret Service and you'd have like probably an entire level dedicated to Trump. I mean, and he would be even more popular than ever. But that's their only hope. And so the Supreme Court really should get involved before July. I don't know if there's any possibility. Hopefully his lawyers go. They should circumvent the state courts. They should circumvent the appeals court in New York. Tell the Supreme Court, hey, look, it's going to be a year, long past November 5th. Take care of this now and save this country from like humiliation at the hands of, apoplectic, wonderful, morally superior Democrats. And I think that's what they should do. The Supreme Court should, before the Republican convention, overturn the verdict.
Presidency, what they've done to you, you've got the verdict that just came through. A lot of Democrats have expressed concern that if you're elected, you're going to want revenge. And some of your supporters have said, well, mutually, we're just talking about the weaponization of the justice system against political opponents.
If Trump committed a crime, then he should go to jail. If Biden or Hillary or Bill or Hunter committed crimes, then they should go to jail. If a Democrat or Republican, if Bernie Sanders committed a crime, he should go to jail. If anyone commits a crime, they should go to jail. The problem here is that Trump did not commit a crime. And they tried desperately to convict him. They were successful in that. The FEC did not find Trump. They fined Clinton and the DNC. There was no federal crime he committed. That's what makes it unconstitutional. But when Democrats say, oh, he's going to go after us, like, well, did you commit crimes? I don't know. You think Hunter's laptop is full of bribery and graft? What's a greater national security risk, Hunter's laptop or Trump paying Stormy?
Some of your supporters have said, well, the only way to stop this is mutually assured destruction, right? If you do it to us, we're going to do it to you. You've said, no, my revenge is going to be success for America. You've just had this verdict. Yeah. Do you still feel the same? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a really tough question in one way, because these are bad people. These people are sick, and they do things that are so destructive. I mean, look what they did from the day I got there. And I don't know, a lot of people said, we have no choice but to elect Trump. Republicans, because he's the only one that can withstand this. Don't forget, if it weren't me, they'd be going after somebody else. And I know a lot of the competition, they wouldn't do so well. They wouldn't be doing so well right now. They'd be saying, Mommy, take me home. I want to go home. This is brutal. But these are sick people. And for instance, the 51 intelligence agents, who thinks of these? And they think about it just like they say, I'm guilty of, and all this information was from so many years before the election. It's before the election. So
that's a great point, because so you're talking about the intel agencies. Obviously, remember what Chuck Schumer said? He said, if you tick off the intel agencies, they'll find a way to get you 6 ways a day. If you're elected, are you going to reform the intel community? What exactly are you going to do to make sure they don't target Americans like this?
Well, first of all, if you remember, when I took over, we had a guy named Comey. He was there. I didn't put him there. I didn't want him there.
The 30 seconds we have left.
Actually, and he tried to get me, and I reversed it on him. Some people said he cost Hillary the election, and he didn't want to. But he was a bad guy, not a capable guy, an evil guy. They were doing things that, I won't mention here because it's so conspiratorial. I don't want to be conspiratorial. It's too nice a show. But but bad guy. I fired him. Then I fired Strzok and Page and this one and that one. I got rid of that whole group of people, and we were doing great. Look, it's a very interesting question, and I say it and it sounds beautiful, right? You know, my revenge will be success, and I mean that. But it's awfully hard when you see what they've done. These people are so evil. And at the same time, the country can come together. You know, I'm saying this, but the country can come together. You know, during my term, prior to COVID, we had the most successful country we've ever had.
I want to follow up on what Rachel asked you, though, because I hear you struggling with it. I hear you say it's a tough question, a bit unsure. You famously said regarding Hillary Clinton, lock her up. You declined to do that as president.
I beat her. It's easier when you win.
Here's the thing with Trump and the people he was up against. He should have gotten off Twitter, and he should have understood that they were trying to set him up at every turn. And he also should have understood that the people that he hired in many cases were going to betray him. Now, we had a great economy, great foreign policy, didn't get us into any wars, but because of all those things and the Twitter issue, Democrats derived momentum from indignation. Say, look at what he said, look at what he said. And Twitter was run by left-leaning people before Elon Musk, who literally worked with the government to silence speech. If he just goes in and tones a little bit, I love Trump's personality, but he needs to, if he tones it down just a little and stays on Truth Social, never goes back on Twitter ever again, and just, if there's like a contentious issue, maybe not, instead of keeping it 100, keep it 85, okay? There's nothing stopping him his next 4 years if he does that.
And they all said lock her up. And I felt, and I could have done it, but I felt it would have been a terrible thing. And then this happened to me. And so I may feel differently about it. I can't tell you, I'm not sure I can answer the question. Hillary Clinton, I didn't say lock her up, but the people would all say lock her up, lock her up. Okay. Then we won. And I said pretty openly, I say, all right, come on, just relax. Let's go. We got to make our country great.
Yeah.
And it would have been, think of it, you lock up.
But see, they view that as weakness. Democrats view that as weakness. The second he defeated Clinton, they were trying to imprison Trump. The second. And so he also couldn't do anything. He didn't have he didn't have the media. He didn't have the allies in the Department of Justice or the State Department or intel agencies. This next time around might be different, could be different. But he has to treat his political opponents in a reciprocal manner. Okay? It's like he has to, on continual loop, play James Brown, the big Payback. Great song.
The wife of a president of the United States.
But they want to lock you up over $130,000 of an accounting thing, and
a perfectly stated accounting thing. But people also say, can you bring the country together? And the answer is yes. Success will bring the country together because I had it together. Yeah. Before the China virus came in, I had it together. We really had it together. And it would have stayed. I think it would have stayed. Everybody was doing better. The country was doing better than it had ever done. And we're going back to those same policies and then some.
Americans have lost a lot of trust in institutions. And I think there's been a lot of discussion, especially online and especially with young people. How do we rebuild that trust in institutions? The CIA, the FBI, all those institutions.
Yeah, you're right.
Some people think that one way to build trust is to declassify things that everyone's talking about. I know you talked earlier about, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist.
That's a whole other issue. Let's just go a little bit forward.
nasty. This is a nasty business. This is a nasty world.
How do you find
and
those
Barr,
steel-spine people
I know,
in the future?
Barr was threatened. In all fairness to him, he didn't want to, he was Attorney General. He was a respected guy. And they said they were going to impeach him. I understand that. I said, I got impeached twice and my numbers went up, which is unusual. I said, it's not so bad to be impeached. What are they going to impeach you? He had no idea what they were going to impeach. But he was going to be impeached. They didn't know what. They didn't know why. It's like they took me to trial. There's no crime. They were trying to devise the crime during the trial. That's how bad it was. But with Barr, and he let me down. He let me down. He let down our country. He endorsed me the other day, as you saw, right? But he let down our country. It takes a brave person to do it.
I love President Trump. I think he's fantastic. The only thing, he has to get an actual he has to get a loyalist like Merrick Garland, who is a loyalist of the Democratic Party, and then Biden. But he's not loyal to Biden. Merrick Garland is loyal to the Democratic Party. You need a Trump Republican as Attorney General. He needs a loyal Trump Republican the way Merrick Garland is a loyal Democrat. And then the way media spins it is that, well, Merrick Garland and everyone is completely unbiased. And they're completely autonomous and they're never influenced by. So when all that money went into the foundation, President Obama was definitely not influenced to refuse to veto the sale of uranium. Oh, yeah. So the way Democrats work is that obvious conflicts of interest never influence them at all. Ever, ever, ever. But he needs the same loyalists that Democrats had. That's all.
People don't want to be impeached. They don't want to be indicted by these scoundrels who are much more evil than people. I'm telling you, China and Russia, they're not the problem. We have a problem from within that's really bad. So he let us down. The key to really good government, where we had Lighthizer and some of these people that were really good, it's the person that's at the top. If you get the right person, it's like magic. It's like in real estate, you put a good super in a building, the building runs well. You put a bad one in, it doesn't. It's the same thing at a little bit slightly larger scale. But we had great people. I rebuilt the military. We did things that were amazing. One of the things that the people that watch your show should know, we defeated ISIS quickly. I was told it would take 5.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the Supreme Court has to save the country like it did with the Colorado ban, like it will do with immunity. It was a blatantly partisan and very sad, pathetic attempt utilizing misdemeanors that were elevated to a felony, misdemeanors that went beyond the statute of limitations, elevated to a felony with a non-existent federal crime. It's tailor-made for the Supreme Court to unanimously reverse. I'll be back tomorrow at around, let's say, 4 p.m. Eastern. Hit subscribe to this channel. Thanks, everybody. God bless you all. I'll see you tomorrow. Be here on this channel. Hit subscribe right now. The Supreme Court, like I have been saying, I'm one of the few people in all of YouTube talking about this, and this is going to be a landmark, huge, huge decision yet again in favor of Trump. Hit subscribe.